A very good evening to all my dear viewers. I feel really proud and privileged to welcome a well known guest for today's session. It is none other than our very own person, Mr. Lee Havis, the head of the International Montessori Society. We welcome you, sir. Seed Global School feels really honored to have you with us for such wonderful sessions. This is the third time we are having Mr. Lee Havis here with us. First, we had an interaction of what Montessori education is. Then, we had a tiny tots with us discussing all their questions and queries. And now, we have our well trained Montessori faculties from Seed Global School. We are running a well defined Montessori Institute for the past 4 years, which is coined as Seed Smile. Now, with all success, we have entered into the fifth year, but with a new experience, the virtual classroom. So far, so good. We are at a good place in the Montessori methods of learning, rendering our kids the best of what they could get in vivid areas. With around 25 faculties, Seed Smile has reached its glory. I feel extremely overwhelmed in welcoming and introducing you to the Seed Smile group. We welcome you, sir. So over to Mr. Lee Havis.
Well, thank you. I, I'd like to start with some broad concepts, presentation to share about what I am calling the technology of scientific education, relating as your school to Montessori's work. We call it Montessori teaching. But really, Dr. Montessori started with the idea of children who have in interaction with physical. Actually, the fundamental concept is observation in an environment where the children have this type of freedom. The problem has been in developing this idea, what really has been called scientific education, is that the fundamental aspect of what brings about the great changes that Dr. Montessori referred to have not been well understood in practice. People instinctively know how to follow the child as a spiritual being to bring about these wonderful changes. But understanding how to, we're not all born teachers and everybody is flawed. We live in a very dysfunctional world. Around us, every one of us has been conditioned from childhood to think and act in ways that are in violation of laws of nature. So we don't see these wonderful results that Dr. Montessori spoke about when she referred to the normalized child. The key experience of Montessori teaching, what I'm going to call scientific teaching, is aimed to bring about normalization. And until we can understand how that comes about in a conscious and scientific way, we'll always be groping on instincts and general ideas, and we'll never really accomplish the ultimate goal that Dr. Montessori had. So what my work has been to do is actually a discovery of what is the conditions that bring about the child's true nature. And I've developed, it is a scientific way of being, so it's not an automatic first or immediate experience that you have. It's a slow developing, step-by-step process of creating an environment. So I want to go over some of the particulars because uh, we're not controlling the environment, but we are we are conducting a type of observation that allows these wonderful changes to take place. So I've developed a webinar which I've started uh, uh, at. You can find out more about it at my website, imsmontessori.org. The technology of scientific education. I'm going to give a little introduction to that. First of all, we look at a classroom and we're confused. We see the results, but we don't understand how it comes about. We see the materials, we see the children concentrating, we see the teacher in the background, and we can envision what a wonderful world it would be like if we didn't, if if everyone as an adult was self-disciplined, was in peace and harmony, we would have no need for military or police or jails or prisons or laws. Everybody would just be functioning in a perfect, orderly world. That is the vision and hope and promise of Dr. Montessori's new education. But in order to achieve that, we have to take one step at a time and what's the word? Reconstitute an environment from what the world has, which is controlling children, looking at certain superficial aspects of what's happening. We have to create an environment that allows these wonderful changes to take place in children. If they can take place in children, to bring about this normalization, and it can be sustained, then the world itself would change, would become harmonious, peaceful, in a natural way where we didn't have to have controls, where there was not poverty and dishonesty and the corruption that we see around us. The whole key is what we do to children, and we have to change our behavior because the behavior that we typically employ comes from a very dysfunctional context. So we have to create a new context, a new condition. So let's take a look at what is scientific education, because scientific education is really the application of a way of being that allows all these wonderful changes to take place. We really only have time to make a little introduction to it, but let's take a look at what it is that brings about these wonderful changes. We're talking about a commitment to laws of nature. Now, we don't know laws of nature directly. So we have to find ways that we can understand close to what laws of nature are, and then gradually bring about this commitment. So what we're looking at is a freedom for the child's true natural development. That's a more conscious way of looking at it. But what is freedom and what is the child's true nature? Well, we have to explore that. We have to break away from the ordinary way of looking at freedom and truth and natural development to function in a different way. So the functioning that is going to bring about this condition of commitment to laws of nature is being committed to laws of nature. So we really have to look at being as different from the way we ordinarily are in society. And the way we usually are is dysfunctional. So we have to function in a different way. The basic function is to control the environment, not the child. But we need to understand what is the environment and what is the child. And because we don't understand the difference clearly, we make many mistakes. And we wind up bringing about the same conditions that we were brought up in. So we have to look at the child in a new and different way. We have to look at the child not as a physical being or a personality, a behavior pattern, we have to look at the child as a complete unknown entity, to look at the child as a non-physical being, a spiritual being. We don't know that child. It's also the center of what I call a misbehavior scenario. So when there is disorder in a child, it's not from the child, it's from the environment around the child. So what is the environment? The environment has to be around an individual child. And what it is composed of three elements. And these are the elements that concern what I call scientific teaching. This is what scientific teaching is about. It's about controlling these three elements: physical objects, other children, and the adult personality. Around a child, there are. So we need to look at these very specifically. But let's take a look at the child. Let's take a look at a typical example. Now, we can see that somewhere in that physical body of the child is what we call the child. Let's look around that child and see what's in the environment. Well, we see physical objects. That's clear. We don't see any other children. But what is it that we don't see that is in the environment? The adult personality. It's who you are, or who you are presenting yourself to be when you're looking at the child. When we're looking at the child, we are really dealing with our own adult personality. And that's an element that's very difficult to control, but that's where the problems are. That's where the confusion and the difficulties are, how to control the adult personality. The adult personality is not necessarily being. And the type of being that we need to construct is committed to laws of nature and is not our typical way of being, which is our way that we were conditioned when we were a child, or the way society, as other people tell us who we are. If we act in that way, we project abandonment and negativity. Those are the conditions of the ordinary adult personality. We're looking, in scientific teaching, we're looking to function according to laws of nature, a different way of being. Now, that's the very difficult challenge, and Dr. Montessori would call this inner preparation or self-examination. But that's what is so important in developing and preparing yourself for scientific teaching. So in order to control the environment, in order to function in this new way of being, I've consolidated over years of examining the problems of being a scientific teacher or functioning in this scientific way, a number of control mechanisms and devices, which I call technology, that you're going to use to conduct scientific teaching. So this is a summary of it. And in the International Montessori Society, this is basically the substance of the training of the teachers. Things to do. These are very specific things to do. I call them techniques. These need to be understood and practiced as a habit, but they need to be practiced in certain ways that follow laws of nature. And that's what the protocols are. The protocols over here on the other side of the page, there are 20 of them. Some are very important, the ones at the beginning, like well-being of the total environment, least amount of adult involvement. These protocols guide you in conducting these techniques. Now, when you combine techniques and protocols together, what you have is an experiment, or what I call an experimental interaction. Now, you're going to be controlling the environment. That is, When I say controlling the environment, what I mean is removing detrimental influences from around the child. That is, looking at the physical objects, the other children, and the adult personality, and asking yourself, what is in disorder? What is not consistent with the perfection of laws of nature? The technology gives you tools to conduct these experiments, to try things out. What you're doing is you're removing obstacles from your ability to become perfectly aware of the truth of the child according to laws of nature. So that's what a lesson presentation is. There's three types. Most people in conventional training in Montessori focus a lot on the sensorial introduction, basically showing materials. While that's important, the most important one is resolving misbehavior. But in any case, they're all experimental interactions and they're all ways of controlling the environment. In order to control your personality, I've added safe words, that is controlling your verbal communication. So this is many mistakes come about because we say things that are detrimental and harmful to children. So we have to control our verbal communication. Here's an example of two a technique and a protocol. The technique is eye contact, and the protocol we're following is eye contact before talking. That is, never talk to a child until and unless you have eye contact. And then the eye contact has to be neutral and friendly. It can't be scolding or with a frown on your face or manipulative. So here's a common example of how an adult personality is detrimental. You're talking to a child without eye contact. So the protocol tells you get eye contact before talking. And so there's an example of a proper way to communicate with a child. When you have eye contact that is friendly and supportive, you can say things. Now, what to say? We have safe words for that. And obviously, there needs to be more control. There needs to be more understanding of the technology to know how to talk to a child. There's more detailed requirements in terms of functioning in this new way of being. But this is an example just to show you how the technology works to control your behavior. And most of it is focused on the adult personality. So uh, so I want to return to our screen. And if there are any questions, I know that there are multitudinous questions because all I did was really open up a window into this scientific education. I think if you listen to the presentation, listen to this brief 10-minute presentation, you may get some new ideas. But I know the words are a little um, uh, are new and require a lot more than we can talk about in a few minutes. But we have some videos that might, make it more, connect you more to the kinds of things that come about when you follow laws of nature. And the technology is a functional equivalent of following laws of nature. That's why it's important, because you don't have to rely on your instincts. You don't have to rely on the way you were conditioned when you were a child. You can follow the technology. So you make mistakes, but you correct them because it's experimental. So is that clear? Does that communicate? I know you're experienced teachers. I imagine you're pretty good teachers. From what I can tell from the pictures, you have a lot of good ideas, and a lot of this is probably making sense to you. But if you have questions,
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your wonderful session, sir. It was really useful for us. So we have our teachers here they do have a couple of questions to ask, and they wanted to clarify all their queries with you and get more knowledge about Montessori. So let me welcome our teacher. So firstly, I would like to invite one of our Montessori teacher. Her name is Namira. So I welcome Namira, ma'am.
Thank you, Krishma ma'am. Hello, sir. I'm Nemira. I'm a teacher of Montessori teacher of Sid Global School. I have a question for you today. What are the most important traits of a Montessori teacher? Once again, I repeat, what are the most important traits of a Montessori teacher?
Well, Dr. Montessori said, she spent 40 years communicating her profound ideas, and um, she spoke about humility as being perhaps the most fundamental. The problem, Montessori teaching is mostly unlearning very, very hard ideas that been brought up with. We have to unlearn that. And when you're very convinced that something a particular way, like a child is bad, or a child will not learn, or I can only do so much, or I'm only one person. When you come up against very strong ideas like that, if I told you that they were in violation of laws of nature, they're not true, they're not fundamentally true, what does it take to remove those beliefs, to enter into something that maybe you're not very sure of, or your 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 inner feelings don't direct you to adopt to a new observation instead of teaching. It's You have to adjust yourself. Dr. Montessori said you can't change, you can only create yourself as a new being. And how do you do that? I think humility is essential to observation. You have to orient yourself to look at children in a different way, in a spiritual way, and to be able to question very fundamental beliefs that you've had. You have to have an open mind, not to be a victim, not to subjugate yourself to irrationality, but to open yourself up to question things that you've always felt to be true, that maybe take an experimental way, try something new. So humility is critical to that. When you see a problem, in other words, don't blame the child. Question yourself. What mistake are you making? That you're on the right track when you do that, but that's hard if you have strong convictions that you're right and the child is wrong. So you have to reorient yourself.
Okay, thank you, sir.
That
Thank you
makes
for your
sense?
valuable information.
Thank you very much, sir. That was really, really informative. So we'll move with the next question for you. So here we have another Montessori teacher with us, Miss Danya Pratish. So she'll be having a question for you. Danya, ma'am, over to you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, yes. I'm Dania. I'm a Montessori teacher. I have one question. What are the current developments in the Montessori field? Once more, what are the current developments in the Montessori field?
Well, let me ask you a question, Danya. Why is that important to you? Who cares? Why do you care? Why is that important to you? Are you looking for guidance? You're looking at a condition outside yourself. You might say, you know, how is what is how are politics changing in the world, right? And we're all concerned about that. I read the papers. I'm always concerned about what leaders are doing, and it is important, in a way to kind of see how we're connected. But I'd like you to look at the question. I'm going to turn it back to you and say, what are the current developments in your life? You're very important, and you're the one who's going to make history, not the leaders in the development movement, or great changes you see outside yourself. You really, I challenge you to look inside yourself and to see yourself as the key to the whole evolution of humanity. That's a pretty bold statement, isn't it? But when you look at the world in a spiritual way, which is the way I look at it as an internal challenge, an internal development. If you can, if you can master and control your development, you can be at peace, you can have joy, you can look at yourself as the center of the evolution of humanity. I'd like you to look at things that way. The best example in India and maybe the world is Gandhi. You study the life of Mohandas Gandhi, a small, insignificant human being on the surface, but he had a great spirit, wasn't he? Mahatma, right? And look at the changes that he made because he had a simple idea. I'd like you to look at yourself that way. Not be so concerned about the development of other people. Because you can change the development. You can be a leader in India. It's really up to each one of us to see what we can do to create a new reality. That's exciting. Something you can do, and you have such an important responsibility. When you're working with children, when you're creating an environment for those precious beings that are in your hand, you're controlling the environment. You have in many respects, you have the destiny in your hands of what the limits of those children are going to be in life. One of those children that are in your classroom could be the next Gandhi, could be the next inventor of some great change in the world.
Thank you so much, sir. These words were really, really inspiring for us because your words really proved that our leader is within ourselves. We don't want to find another leader outside. That was really great. So I hope, Danya ma'am, you would be very much satisfied with this answer. So I'll call upon the next
Thank you,
person.
sir.
So I would like to invite Miss Salma for her question. So over to you, Salma ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Hi, sir. I'm Selma, a pre-primary Montessori teacher of this school. I have a question for you. How can we apply Montessori practical activities in an online platform?
Wow, that is a very good practical question because it is difficult for I'm learning how to. This is a new experience for me. How do you train scientific teachers in an online format? I have to learn how to do that. And teachers, I have a tutoring program a small program in a local area, and we can't go into the homes, so the tutors have to function online, and I'm learning from them about how they're communicating with children. And they're wonderful devices that they have. I'm learning all the time from the tutors how they're interacting with children. Um, there are things like whiteboards, things where you can actually uh, you can create slides. And I don't know all the I haven't worked it, to know, but I do know that there's things like FaceTime, where the tutors can translate academic activities into instructions that they can communicate um, visual means. The first video, the first interaction that we had, I showed things. I showed pieces of paper up on the screen so you could see. You remember? I don't know if you were there, but that was the way I communicated at first. Now, how am I communicated? I I created the little presentation, didn't I? So there are devices that you can interact with, but it's very difficult unless you look into it, look into the mechanisms. There are good videos and tutorials that you can see how teachers have used an online mechanism to create slides, for example, presentations where the other person can communicate together. And I think you just have to, search on the internet and see and kind of have that a learning experience. Hopefully that won't be a continual, problem in the future, because I think there are obvious limitations. You really want to be interactive and in a physical setting with children, because young children are very sensorial. They've got to put their hands on materials. There is a piece of there is a video that I put out about handling Montessori materials, where the child could actually move materials around on the screen, touch and select and move. But that's very indirect. That's not really very sensorial. It's just touching the screen and making things happen that way. So we adapt. Every situation has imperfections and difficulties in it. But you're going to see some videos, incidentally. When we get to the videos, you're going to see how I have adapted um, uh, a program to bring scientific teaching into the streets, into children, without all the fancy equipment and so forth. So adaptation, that's the key. There are wonderful stories of when India and Pakistan were in conflict. There were refugee camps. There was a wonderful Indian, I think she was Indian, Montessori teacher, was in one of those refugee camps, and she created a Montessori school out of nothing, just dirt on the floor, and using a dirt floor as a kind of a blackboard or a whiteboard, where she provided all the instruction with virtually nothing. And the viceroy of India came and visited, and he said, "I wish I could have had my child in a wonderful Montessori school like this." So you adapt. You take what you have available. We have to adapt.
Thank you so much, sir. Montessori means we know that we have to use all our five senses when you deal with a child. So you have proved that nothing is impossible when you have the dedication and mindset. Thank you so much for your words. So next, I would like to welcome Lubaiba ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Lubaiba ma'am, over to you.
Yes, good evening. I am Lubaiba. I am Montessori teacher. I have a question for you. Sir, can you describe your experience resolve conflict between two children?
You describe experience when you resolved a conflict between two children. I've done that so often. Oftentimes, let me tell you something. Social conflict is often not just between two children, but I'll tell you one. I love stories. If you have more, I'm going to tell you one story. I was a few years ago. I had an experimental program that I was operating, and I would observe the teacher. And I wasn't a regular teacher in the classroom, but it was my school, and I was showing her what to do. And there was a two children that were in very like a bully and victim situation. One child was dominating the other child, pushing her around, manipulating. There was a connection between the two. They seemed to gravitate to each other, but there was a violence every once in a while that one child would hit the other child or would hit the other child. And this was going on day after day. So I committed myself. I entered into the environment and I said, we're going to fix this problem. And the way I fixed it was I stayed very close to the situation. I didn't intervene. It must have been an hour or more, watching them very close to coming into physical contact. I didn't say one word to them. But when one child put her hand up at one point and was about to strike the other child, I put my hand in the way. It's all I did. I just put my hand in the way. So instead of the child hitting the other child, the child hit my hand. What happened was the child looked at me and suddenly got this horrible fear in her eyes. She ran away and crawled under a table. The whole classroom became silent. And they said, "What happened?" And this girl was so ashamed and so embarrassed about what she did. And everybody took note of it, wanted to know what had happened. And all I did was I was there at the right time because I knew something was going to happen. You know something? That never happened again. It's magic in a way, but it's not when you're scientifically following the technology, which is what I was doing. This is what happens when a child comes to himself or herself and they feel that inner guidance. But you have to control the environment. I controlled the environment. And the two just became very harmonious after that. The whole classroom changed. How's that? You like that one? There are many
Yes, sir,
situations.
definitely. It
Yeah,
was
it's
awesome.
see that, and you can see that too. Incidentally, if you look in the environment, find what's detrimental, and remove that one step at a time.
Sure, sir.
I
We
had
will
to
definitely follow experiences.
I had to observe that. You have to realize I had to observe that for an hour. That didn't just happen. Things don't just happen. You have to prepare yourself. You have to control yourself. And, a lot of scientific teaching is really controlling yourself, not reacting, not trying to force a solution by controlling the child.
Sure, sir. Definitely. Thank you so much for your words. So I would like to call upon the next Montessori directress from our school. So I would like to welcome Miss Sajita. So over to you, Sajita, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Hi, sir. I'm Sajida. I'm a pre-primary Montessori educator of this school. I have a question to you, sir. How does a Montessori education impact a child behavior at home? I'll repeat once again, sir. How does a Montessori educator impact a child's behavior at home?
Yes, well, that's a very good question. And of course, there's an answer to your question, but there's the question that you're really asking is more fundamental. How do you extend what you're doing, the good things that you're doing, to impact the home environment? So the simple answer to the question is it has a positive impact. When you're creating an environment committed to laws of nature in the classroom, the child is going to remember that and is going to start acting differently, more calm, more self-disciplined at home. The problem is, the real question that you're asking is, how come when the child comes back the next day or the next week after being mistreated at home, you have to start all over again? You see the problem? The problem is it doesn't have very much of an impact unless you can include the parents in what you're doing. So you have to have, at some point, you have to have a sit down talk with the parent, explain to them what you're doing, and get them to cooperate at home. Because the environment is not limited to a classroom. The environment that you have to be responsible for is every adult that impinges on the children that are in your classroom. And what the parents are doing at home is like just what your classroom assistant is doing. If you have another teacher in the classroom, you can't ignore what the other teacher's doing. You say, I'm doing fine, but the other teacher's really messing things up. No, that's not going to work. You've got to take responsibility for all of the impact that is happening in with your children. And that means if the parents are not cooperating with you, you've got to get their cooperation.
Thank you very much, sir. So I would like to move to the
Thank you,
next
sir.
person. So I have Ms. Jijina here. So Jijina ma'am, your question please.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Hello, sir. I am Jijina. I have a question for you. How can we transform a child from a non-Montessori environment to a Montessori environment?
That is a wonderful question. And it's a very practical question too, isn't it? Because the vast majority of environments, even sometimes when they're called Montessori, are not really consistent with laws of nature. We have to change, don't we? We have to learn how to change. And, you know, uh, I deal so much with that. I've done over 150 workshops all over the world. It's always the same thing. It's people need to change. I talk to teachers in the workshop. They say, I want to do what you're telling me, but if I do what you're telling me, I'm going to be fired because the school doesn't let me do that. And I always challenge people to make a decision that you're going to follow laws of nature and you're going to follow a new path no matter what other people are doing. So there has to be a willingness in the Montessori, who's ever controlling the environment, they have to be willing to change. That's the most frustrating part of of my work is to tell people what to do and then to realize that you can't do it for them. They have to be willing to change. And the good news is that sometimes people are, and when they are, wonderful changes happen. I've got a whole file drawer full of people who have changed their behavior and changed their behavior from a non-environment, a non-scientific, shall we say, a conventional environment to one that is different. We're all in that process of change. I can look back over my life and say, boy, how terrible I was. And I had to change. I had to learn. Unfortunately, a lot of suffering comes along with that. But the good news is that you can change if you have humility and if you have guidance. Now, I'm here to provide guidance, but the person has to be willing to take the guidance, and that's at some point you have to let that go and realize that you can be a good model, and that's a good place to begin. Do the right thing. And if the other person doesn't do the right thing, sometimes you just have to let them go. But that's a good question. I wish there
Thank you,
was
sir.
a completely satisfactory answer. All I can say is that it takes time. People have to learn in their own way, and you do the best you can. You never know when. I've been so surprised. Sometimes the most evil and harmful and belligerent and hostile people, I've seen changes take place. So you never know. Don't ever give up on people.
Thank you so much,
You
sir.
never
So as you said, it takes time. So we need a lot of patience to wait for miracles to
patience,
happen.
patience
Yes,
and humility. It's two things. Yes.
yes, definitely. Because I know that that is a key element of every Montessori teacher, being patient. Thank you so much, sir, for your inspiring words. So next, I move on to Ms. Ramla. another teacher from a Montessori department. So over to you, Ramla ma'am. Ma'am, please, could you please unmute and speak? Thank
Sorry.
you.
Hello, sir. I'm Ramla. I also have a question for you, sir. How can we manage a special child with other children?
Well, Ramla, um, let me first say that all children are special. I don't want to be dismissive of your question. I know what your question is. I know it's a practical question, but I want to I want you to shift your thinking about children. I want you to change your perception of the child from the diagnosis, hyperactive, blind, deaf, handicapped, mentally deranged. Change your perspective of looking at the child from that perspective of the weakness, the debility, the unique difficulties of the child to the child as an unknown entity. You just don't know what a child can do, but we have to take away our judgments of the child. You just don't know what you can accomplish with a special child. A wonderful story, a program that I was operating for one day a week, just an hour a week or so. I was working with children of different ages, and they would come in as they are. I remember the first day when this one child came in. He had been in a special needs program in the public school for years, ever since he was in kindergarten. So he was really conditioned to behavior modification. Came in absolutely. He charged around the room, 12 years old, claiming he was king of the world. No eye contact with anybody, raising his fist. Any child he could put completely disconnected from reality. I had to watch over carefully the 3-year-old children, the little children, because he was a constant threat. So little eye contact, very little communication with him. I never judged him. I looked at the environment week to week after week and just took the behavior as it was and dealt with it, not judging him at all, but just dealing with the behavior. You know, I don't know, it was a few months later, one of the students in my training program came in and she was observing in the classroom, and she said, I think it's wonderful the way your classroom assistant is doing the lessons exactly the way you teach us in the training. And I said, oh, what assistant are you talking about? I don't have any assistant. He said, well, that guy over there, while we're talking, he's doing all the things that you tell us to do. And I look over there, and it's that 12-year-old boy. He learned, and I see that all the time. Children see things. I've got so many wonderful, that's one of the most wonderful stories there are. They're over and over again that children see and hear when you don't think that they are. You know, that 12-year-old boy became a football and baseball coach of children. He went on to go to a prominent university and became a special needs teacher himself. How many stories? You know, there are a lot of stories like that, but you have to remove your judgment from the child. Let the child show what they can do. That's, you know, scientific education is all about Etard and Seguin, who worked with dysfunctional children, right? You know the story of the wild boy of Avignon? The boy who was wild, who was brought up as a savage. Etard observed him, and that's really how scientific education began. And Dr. Montessori began with special needs children too, didn't she? And she discovered that they could do a lot more than people expected. So you just adopt and incorporate those children into the classroom and just keep controlling the environment.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. Sir, next we would like to present a video about our school, Montessori system and education. So
Very.
hold on.
Let me.
Thank you.
Can I introduce the first one? Are we
Sir?
ready for the video?
Yes, the
Are we
video is
ready?
ready. We'll be playing the video now. So we have a
Okay.
video for you which shows
Yeah.
the Montessori system of our school. So please
Okay.
sit back and watch. You will have good things. I hope you enjoyed it. You had a good time with the video over here.
Yeah, I saw that video before. It's very impressive. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. So we'll
Yes.
continue with the questionnaire session. So we have another Montessori faculty over here, Miss Sharifa. So I welcome Sharifa ma'am
Okay.
with your questions.
Hi, sir. I'm Sharifa.
Hello.
How can we improve the writing skill of a child? That's my question.
You know, that is so interesting in today's world where writing is a sort of an unknown skill. I was visiting a high school recently, and I saw all the children were printing. They don't know cursive, do they? I don't know. Your writing in India is different. So, um, uh, it's probably a little bit of a different skill that you have to develop. But in the United States, everybody's working on their iPads. Everybody's typing on their keyboards. So they don't write. They don't learn what we call cursive. Do you have, English writing, right? I mean, you have Indian, you have Hindi writing, but you also have English, right? So the English language has a print and it has cursive. So when we talk about writing, we usually think of connecting the letters together in a smooth way. And, it's amazing that children are not learning that typically in schools. So because they're just printing. I think writing cursive is a skill that, just like learning foreign languages, is something. If you can do it, definitely teach it. Your question is to improve that skill. Well, improving it is through practice, isn't it? You have to show them. You have to show them how to make the letters. In my tutoring program, I have little instructions on how do you make the letter G and how do you make the letter E, and then they practice it. So it's just like instructing in anything. You show them what to do. You show opportunity to practice it. But if they don't see it practiced, they're not likely to even have an interest in it. So you don't want to show things or teach things to children that they're not interested in. So one of the best ways to improve writing is to write, right? Children imitate. So when you're communicating to children, don't hand them printed sheets. write things out in cursive so that they'll take an interest, so they want to do that. And it's a bit of a challenge when everything is printed, right?
Yes, sir, definitely. So the best part in doing something is just start doing it. Correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, we feel that our children, they do practice a cursive writing, but they don't feel that interest to write when compared to reading.
Well, they're not
So definitely,
interested because they don't see it being used. So,
yes, definitely.
there has to, but look, children can, everybody's an individual, and some children will spend hours and days working on long math problems, and other children are not interested in math at all. And you just take the child what they're interested in. You need to trust the child's inner guidance. They're not playing, they're not goofing off, they're not pretending, they're not in fantasy, they're not inattentive. They're concentrating on what nature is directing them to focus on. So your job is to create an environment where opportunities are available. Um, that classroom that I showed you in the presentation from Malaysia, did you notice that? Country Hills, I think. Do you know in those classrooms in Malaysia, they have 3 languages? They have materials that teach English, Chinese, and Bahasa. And the children use those 3 languages are used in the culture, so they're interested. They have a teacher who speaks Bahasa and one who speaks Chinese, one who speaks English, and the children learn all those languages very well. I spent a week in a school in Quebec, Canada. The children speak French and English with absolute perfect skill in both languages. Now, there are some children who struggle in one way or another, but because the culture is bilingual, because there's always French and English being around in the culture, the children adapt and they learn those things. Children just learn an enormous amount of knowledge if it's available to them, if it's presented to them, not forced on them, but given the opportunity in the environment.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Sir, I have a question for you. Okay, sir. Okay, I have a question for you.
I see your question.
Okay, actually, I want to ask you one thing first. Children always tend to form groups inside the class. That is, they won't mingle with any other person other than their best friends. So, how can we solve this issue?
Well, let me ask you a question. Why is it an issue?
Sir?
Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem?
Okay,
You want
because
them to have a wider social connection? I mean, I'm not challenging you or judging you. I'm just pointing out that um, what is the problem? The problem is always in the environment. If they're not in harmony with each other. Now, look, if 2 children get along well together, look,
okay,
in the world, in reality, chemicals combine. Hydrogen and oxygen combine in particular ways, right? You don't force hydrogen to combine with beryllium because there's no attraction there. There's no uniqueness to the attraction. Children make friends for reasons that we don't understand. They congregate in ways. It's wonderful when you see elementary classroom children they find a place in the community. Some children become leaders, others become followers. It's not one is good and one is bad. It's the way children commingle together in different ways. they find their own friendships, they find their own interests. The most amazing thing, so many amazing things with children, but it shows you the human nature is so individually unique. When I see disorder in the classroom, one of the things that I do when I bring children together is have them close their eyes and think about what they would most like to do in the classroom. And then when they know what it is, go and do it. And when they really do that, when they quiet themselves, it's amazing when I say, okay, now go and do it. You know what happens? They all go in different directions. It's amazing. They don't all gravitate to the same piece of equipment. Each one has an inner guidance. And sometimes children are attracted to each other. Maybe one child, I know some children want to learn what another child is doing. And so they go to that child. And there are things that children learn in social interaction from particular children that they couldn't learn from other children. That's just the dynamics of the group. Now, if they're interacting with each other in a defective, in a dysfunctional way, then that's a problem. And I told you about the problem where there was a bully and a victim. And that was a problem because there was violence, there was disruption, there was disorder. And that was a problem in the environment. But if they're getting along well together, if they're learning and growing and developing, what's the problem? So you have to see if there's a problem in that. If they're getting together to play games and pretend to be outer space creatures or something, that's a problem. But if they're getting together on a work project and they're learning and enjoying each other in harmony, that's fine, isn't it? You have to look beyond the fact that they're choosing the same children all the time to see if there is a problem there or not. It's not necessarily a problem. Not something for you to go in and fix.
Yes, definitely. I would be fixing this when I face another issue like this. So next we have another question by Sajida ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, I have a doubt, sir. I want to clear that, sir. When children are allowed to select their own activities, will they just stick on to one activity alone? Sir, I will repeat once again.
When
When
children
children
are
are
allowed,
allowed to select their own activities, will they just stick on to one activity with alone?
again, it depends on whether they're operating in the present moment or whether they're using that as an ability. If they're sticking to one thing all the time because they're avoiding, like more developmental or more more child Lego house, and it was day after day after day, and I would see the same house over and over and over again, exactly the same way. Now, I didn't handle it well at the time, but I did recognize a problem. He wasn't expanding beyond that. He was using that as an escape. I saw that as a problem. I went over to him and and told him to put that away, and I would teach him. I guess I was, teaching him sandpaper letters or come over to you something else. He broke down in tears. And it turned out that he had come from another very rigid environment where he was structured and told what to do. And he was he didn't want to be told what to do. And so, that was, I would have handled it differently now. I would, instead of telling him what to do, I would have asked a question. I would have asked him, what are you doing? And that's what I would tell. If you have a question in your mind that he may be doing that to escape, not to participate in the opportunity of the classroom with lots of things to do, and you think it may be an escape, the question to ask is, what are you doing? And I've done that, and you get into a conversation. If he says, he says, get away from me, I'm building a castle to the moon, then you have an issue. You have to do some more talking. But if he tells you rationally what he's doing, I'm putting these things here together to make this particular thing happen, then, just walk away. But you don't know by just watching on the surface what he's doing. That's the thing. You have to ask a question. And incidentally, that's a technique. That's one of the techniques in the technology. It's called questioning. It's very, very useful at times in this kind of a situation.
Thank you very much, sir. So we have another video for you. So please sit back and enjoy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, this is not my video.
So this video, sir?
I wanted to introduce the video so you understand what you're looking at.
Yes, definitely.
And
This was definitely a key point.
It's a wonderful video. It was a video of a classroom in Bangalore, India. I was doing an accreditation of a Montessori training program, and one of the classrooms there, I walked into the classroom and the children were not working. There were about 40 children. They were just, kind of wandering around and kind of poking at each other and talking loudly. And I said, what are the children supposed to be doing now? I said, well, they're supposed to be working. So I went over and showed a piece of work, but they weren't interested. And the teacher kept asking me, what do we do? And I said, well, let's call them together in a group. That's what you do. So we gathered all the children in a group. And then the teacher kept asking me, what do we do now? I said, well, let's show them a piece of work. So I took a mat out. I showed them the pink tower. And I showed it, and then had one child come up and finish it. And then they're sitting around there. And the teacher kept saying, what do we do now? And I said, do nothing. Let's just wait and see. And that's what you're seeing. We waited and we kept our mouths shut and we watched. And the most amazing thing, the children on their own came up and did a little bit of work and sat down. That went on for about 45 minutes. And that's just such a beautiful demonstration of the patience and the reality, what I call true natural behavior. When you allow children, when you work through the process to bring children to a point where they can really choose, they show such wonderful qualities.
Thank you, sir. So we'll have another video for our viewers.
It's not a 45-minute video. It's only about 5 minutes, but we can move on to the next one. The next one, I think, is myself doing some demonstration of using the technology with some materials that I brought into a special needs classroom. In Malaysia, they have a program called Tasputra Perkam, which has all, children with a lot of serious special needs problems. And I was doing a workshop in Malaysia, and I was visiting this classroom, and you can just see what spontaneously came about. And the video will just kind of demonstrate for you what I was doing spontaneously with children as we were gathered together.
Okay, so
And you can see the technology working. One, two, and three. I'm going to start with 1, 2, and 3. This is a very adaptable piece of equipment. You can use it in a lot of different ways. It can be very complicated, and it can be very simple.
How do we get your voice in? How do we get Mr. Havis's voice in? Okay?
We're going to put these separately. These don't exist for now. We can use them later. Would you like to come over here? We can have several children sit around. It's not something that just for one children. This is my friend. Come over here. Sit over here. Can you sit down here? Sit down here? Okay. Now this is the way the piece of equipment would be on the shelf. I would take it over here, and what we're going to do is we're going to match the numbers with the objects. This may be a little too complicated for some, but we're going to find there's...
Umi can do. Umi, can you come down?
It would be good for a child. You might like to do it. Mohammed would be able to do it, but let's just, hey, we've got a friend over here. So let's take them out here. There's one. Okay, would you like to do the next one? Yeah, you just do the next one. You take this one out. Take the next one out. That's good. You're doing good. And one more. One more. Okay. Now, this is 1. Let's find 1. This is 1. Okay. Let's make 2. Here's 2. Let's make 2. Let's make them with the green. Can you put those 2 together? That's right. You know what we're going to do with these? We're going to attach them together like this. Watch. Can you do that? Let's see you do that. Very good. Okay, put it up there. Okay, let's do 3. Can you attach those together? Very good. Okay. Now, let's disassemble this one. Put these back in here. Okay, take that one and disassemble that one. Okay, take the numbers. Let's put these together. Put them in here. Okay, now let's see if you can do it. Take the numbers out. 1, 2, 3. Let's take them out. Let's put the 3 here. And the 2 here. You're good. Okay, and the 1 here. Okay, now make 1. Put 1 here. Let's see what you can do. Where does that go? Pretty good. And those 2. Too easy for him. We're going to make it harder for him. We're going to find something that will be at his level.
He's finished 6 years of the primary school.
Well, he's enjoying doing it, and that's fine. Okay, let's try something a little more difficult. We've got some more difficult ones in the book. Here. Think you could do these? All right. Let's take, this is incomplete. There's some others here. Let's take,
let's see. Maybe I don't know. This is 4.
That
So
was really
did you
wonderful,
see the
sir,
word?
seeing a video like this.
Did you see the words at the bottom of the image? Those words were the technology and pointing out the things that of course I do it naturally now, but I'm consciously applying certain things like don't control the child, eye contact before talking. Did you notice that? Enhance independence, safe words. I was applying all of that. But as you learn the technology, all of that comes together. As you just interact with the child, when the situation comes up, you know that there are certain things that you have to do to make it all come out right. So this next video, are we ready for the next one?
Yes, sir. So now we have another video. Last one.
Yeah, this next one was myself using some what I call low-tech Montessori materials. I created those materials that you saw me working in Malaysia. I created that out of materials that were available. You can do that. You can buy little trays, put little objects together, and if you know what you're doing, you adapt. And the next video will show you how I adapted materials and the format or the environment to match with a situation of working with children in the street. Now, I happen to be Cebu, Philippines, but I've done it in India also, in Bangalore. It works anywhere. You take some materials, you take a plan, you go out into the streets, you interact with the children for a short amount of time, and do it in a way that follows laws of nature. You're creating a condition that brings about this change that occurs inside children, which Dr. Montessori called. And it shows you that you can have to be constrained by a classroom. You adapt to what the situation allows. And if you just have a few little simple materials and you have a plan that you create a structure of commitment, and you'll see that it's describing in the video how the plan works. But basically, you create a commitment to laws of nature by inviting the child to an experience of a little work project, and you make an agreement with the child that you will give them a little bit of money at the end when they spend a little time concentrating on a piece of work. Then you give them a little bit of money. So the control that you have is that you don't give the money until they complete this. And that little experience is so powerful to a child. It teaches them the value of their own time. The key to this that makes it is time in exchange for money. And I struggled with that when I first tried to figure out a way that you could conduct this type of teaching with very poor children, how you can do that without degrading the child, making the child a victim. Because what does a child have who doesn't have a shirt on his back, who doesn't have any money, who doesn't have any skills? What does he have? He has time, and his time is valuable. And if the child can understand that his time is valuable, it changes his way of thinking about himself from being a helpless victim to somebody who values himself. And it's an experience that can have a profound effect on a child's whole life. No matter how poor they are, they begin to value themselves. It changes their way of thinking. It's something I'd like to put into practice, and I've tried to interest different people in setting up this, but it's very hard for people to understand how this works, because people, vast majority of people just don't look at children as spiritual beings. They don't look at life in this kind of way of following laws of nature. But if people would do that, we could change. In any situation, we could start to change all these terrible conditions that we see around us, because children can change their behavior and change their way of thinking to create a whole new humanity.
Okay, sir, so let's watch another video, which is a character teaching.
Yep. Today, almost everyone is aware that many children around the world suffer and struggle to survive in conditions of extreme poverty. Naturally, we all want to help. In fact, each year, huge sums of money are set aside to provide these children with food, shelter, clothing, medical care, and sometimes even jobs and help to attend school. Unfortunately, this one-sided help also brings with it more need and dependency. Without a fundamental change in the child's character, the cycle of poverty just continues from one generation to the next. In 2001, the International Montessori Society introduced the idea of character teaching to address the basic cause of severe long-term poverty. Character Teaching Project aims to address this problem by training educators and parents in a type of scientific true natural teaching. The basic premise of the CT project is that all children, even those abandoned, neglected, and abused in the worst conditions of poverty, have a perfect inner guidance for true natural character development. The CT project approach is to create the right conditions for children to return to this natural development. Eventually, this brings about such positive outward qualities as self-discipline, personal responsibility, order, integrity, honesty, and complete harmony with others. The CT project goal is to set up schools and centers for true natural teaching to be fully implemented in low-income communities. In addition, a tutoring component is designed to function directly with poor children in the streets as well. You're watching here the project's tutoring component in operation with children in Cebu, Philippines. The sessions are set up on the basis of exchange of value. The child agrees to give a certain amount of his time to pay attention to the lesson, and the tutor agrees to give the child a small amount of money in exchange. The tutor creates the right conditions for character development by withholding payment to the child until after the lesson is satisfactorily completed. The tutor uses simple materials and exercises that are modeled after more elaborate self-teaching equipment employed in formal learning situations. While one single tutoring session will not likely bring about any long-term character change, repeating these sessions on a daily basis will have a very positive impact. Over time, these positive learning experiences begin to deeply fix habits and attitudes of self-confidence, personal responsibility, and trust into the child's whole basic character and personality. Children who participate regularly in this project will receive other incentives to reinforce their experience. They'll receive, for example, books and other learning materials that they can use more independently on their own. As adults, the children will eventually show their positive character qualities through responsible, productive living. This will also contribute to the greater good and progress of the whole surrounding society as well. The unconventional CT project approach does challenge some deeply held beliefs and widespread prejudices about human nature. For many, it is difficult to look past the outward appearances of terrible poverty to see children instead as perfect spiritual beings. Nevertheless, since 2001, the CT project has been gaining support for operation in a number of different countries. Contact the International Montessori Society in the United States if you have questions or would like to follow up in any way.
So that was a wonderful video, sir.
So did you like that?
Okay.
Did you find that interesting? Those videos interesting?
Yes, it was really interesting. Okay, so we have another video from our school. So we have a video of the Montessori Teacher Training Institute, which is run by the Seed Global School. So it is called as Seed Smart. So this is the video which showed the Teachers Training Institute of Seed Global School. So I hope you enjoyed this.
Yeah, well, what I like to what I like to know about is the good work that you're doing, how you're getting along with the children, and you know, the good results that you're bringing about. I appreciated the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. I'm you know, very much interested to know how you're responding and what you're going to do to put this into practice. I mean, I'm guessing that some of these things you're already doing, but to improve, to keep making things better is, I know that that's what your school seems to be about, and that's why I'm here with you, part of a process that you're making things better at your school. And I just, you know, kind of would like to follow up, would like to know more about, you know, how you're improving things, and what are the changes that are taking place, because there's always, you know, improvement, getting better and better. And it's hard because sometimes the support that you get is not very helpful. It's moving you in a different direction. So I am glad to have a chance to interact with you, and would like to stay in touch with you, see how you're putting things into practice. Maybe share some more videos, you know, give some videos.
We would be doing in the upcoming sessions if we have an opportunity to make a session with you again, because every single time when we have a session with you, sir, you just make us think out of the box, and all your learnings and all your innovations that helps us to improve a lot, because we know that learning is an endless process. Be it a student or be it a teacher, learning is always an endless process. So every session which we learn from you, there's always a gain in one form or the other. So it was very happy having a session with you. That is for the third time. So I hope we would be having more sessions if given a chance. So definitely, if you get an opportunity to come down to Kerala after this pandemic, you should definitely come and visit us one day.
Well, I'd like to hear how you're, what what you're learning from the chat that we have. If it's making an impact, it will only come across by what you're doing with children. If you're
Definitely.
changing or developing anything differently, or you're, what impact, um, what impact,
We would
this
be
these
really glad to share such things with you, sir. So, shall we move with the vote of thanks, sir? If there's is there anything to share from your side? And thank you so much for letting us know what is scientific teaching. So that was also a new experience for us.
Well, I want
So
you to put it into practice. I want you to
yes,
use
definitely
it.
that is for sure. Your
You
words
can,
were really inspiring, and I hope our teachers and the entire viewers who's watching this session would have had a good time. So here we have Sharifa ma'am to deliver the vote of thanks for us. So over to you, Sharifa ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Respected Chief Guest, Mr. Lisa, and all Seed Global crew. Good evening, all. It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver the word of thanks for these wonderful moments. Thank you, sir, for a highly informative and entertaining session, which makes us really motivated. You have provided a lot of ideas for us to try in our classrooms and in our lives also. We express our sincere gratitude for sharing your valuable knowledge and experiences for us. I would like to thank our beloved team members for making this a beautiful evening. Thank you once again, sir, from all SEED members, and we wish to meet you again, sir. Thank you. Ma'am?